19-year-old Mallory Beach was one of 6 young adults aboard a fishing boat in February of 2019 when it crashed into a bridge outside of Parris Island, South Carolina.
We're in a boat crash on Archer Creek. There's 6 of us and 1 is missing.
Mallory was thrown to her death. All of the other passengers survived. After investigating the events of that night, authorities would gather the boat's driver, the now deceased Paul Murdaugh, was severely intoxicated. And the alleged owner of the boat, the man accused of killing him, his own father, Alec Murdaugh. Tonight, we'll dive into the looming civil cases. Then, we take a closer look at the news reports about a potential connection between Murdaugh and affiliates of the Blood Street Gang. Was this former attorney actually running a large drug and money laundering operation? Good evening and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Michael Ayala in tonight for Vinnie Politan. And tonight, we are taking you to Low Country, Hampton, South Carolina, where the judge in a civil case involving disgraced former attorney Alec Murdaugh made a big decision this week. But before we dive into that civil case, Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter is going to take us through the complicated case of Alec Murdaugh.
We do believe that Mr. Murdaugh is a danger. He's already, by the previous charges that he had, he's been a danger to himself. And a man who's a danger to himself is a danger to others.
Disgraced attorney Alec Murdaugh was ordered held without bond after being arrested and charged with stealing millions of dollars in insurance money from the family of his longtime housekeeper.
When a lawyer steals with a pen, it's just as bad as somebody who steals with a gun.
Gloria Satterfield died after allegedly tripping and falling over the family dogs at the Murdaugh, South Carolina home. Prosecutors say Murdaugh came up with an elaborate scheme to sue himself, then steal money from her wrongful death settlement. At the time of his arrest, Murdaugh was out on bond, facing charges that he tried to arrange his own death.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency?
Yes, we're on Saga Road, and there is a man on the side of the road with blood all over him, and he's waving his hands.
He just laying there, waving his hands around?
Fine. He looks fine, but it kind of looks like a setup, so we didn't stop.
Oh, I don't blame you.
Prosecutors say it was a setup, that Murdaugh tried to get this man, Curtis Eddie Smith, to kill him, so that the Murdaugh's surviving son, Buster, could collect $10 million in life insurance. Murdaugh has been under a cloud of suspicion since his wife and another son, Paul, were found shot to death. His attorney admits his client may be guilty of financial wrongdoing, but insists Murdaugh had nothing to do with the deaths of his wife and son. He says Murdaugh called 911 after discovering their bodies in the family's hunting lodge.
I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
For nearly a century, the Murdaugh name has embodied a legacy of power and justice in South Carolina's Low Country. Here in the small town of Hampton, it's virtually impossible to find someone who does not know of the prominent legal family. But recently, the name has become synonymous with tragedy. At the time of his death, 22-year-old Paul Murdaugh was awaiting trial, charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence for a 2019 crash that killed 19-year-old Mallory Beach. According to depositions taken in that case, Paul Murdaugh illegally purchased alcohol at Parker's convenience store using his older brother's ID. Surveillance video shows him leaving the gas station, towing his father's 17-foot boat. As he exits the store, you can see him raise his arms in a triumphant gesture to his friends. After attending an oyster roast, the 6 friends headed by boat to a bar in downtown Beaufort, South Carolina. And later, Murdaugh stumbles on the dock as he and his friends return to the boat around 1 a.m. Just over an hour later, the boat slammed into a bridge piling, and Connor Cook called 911.
What bridge is it? Paul, what bridge is this? Paul, what bridge?
911, where's your emergency? Hello?
Police, fire, EMS. Hello?
We're in a boat crash on Arthur Street. There's 6 of us and 1 is missing.
The body of Mallory Beach was found nearly a week later in a marsh about 5 miles from the crash scene. The charges against Paul Murdaugh were dropped after his death, but the investigation is ongoing.
And who can forget that earlier this year, Murdaugh was charged with the murder and the deaths of his wife Maggie and his son Paul. Now back to that civil case stemming from that boat accident. The wrongful death case filed by the family of Mallory Beach is moving forward. And this week, the judge in that case reversed his decision to sever the defendants in the suit. So now the boat crash case involves all the defendants. The Murdaughs and convenience store magnate Greg Parker and his company will be tried together all in one trial. Greg Parker is a defendant because allegedly a clerk at one of his convenience stores sold Paul Murdaugh alcohol hours before that boat crash, but Paul Murdaugh was underage and he used his brother's ID. That's what's alleged. Now, Alec Murdaugh is accused of encouraging Paul's drinking, and the boat did in fact belong to him. Murdaugh's living son, Buster, is a defendant in the case as well, of course accused of allowing Paul to use his license to buy that alcohol. All right, joining me now to discuss in Columbia, South Carolina, the attorney for one of the Murdaugh victims, Joe McCullough. Joe, great to see you. Thanks for being with me. In Charlotte, North Carolina, the creator of the Murdaugh podcast, Impact of Influence, Matt Harris is with us. And in Port Royal, South Carolina, criminal defense attorney and longtime acquaintance of Alec Murdaugh, Jared Newman. Thank you all for being with me tonight. Truly appreciate it. But Joe, I want to start with you because in some ways, I think the judge's decision affects you, obviously, because you have a case coming up that stems from that boat accident. So it would stand to reason that this ruling would hold up for your case as well. So your thoughts on this ruling by the judge, and what does it mean for the lawsuits?
Well, I think and hope that it eliminates this severance concept for all of the plaintiffs in this case. There are, as you know, the Beach case was the first case filed. Connor Cook's case, my case, the case I'm involved in, was the second. Anthony Cook, his cousin, also a person in the boat, injured, was the third. And there are lawsuits now filed on behalf of the other 2 young ladies that survived the boat crash. So this ruling was important to all of us from the standpoint of its applicability and whether, and we assumed, the defendants in the Parker defendants would file the same motion. So it's settled. I read with some pleasure, I should say, that Mr. Parker indicated he was not very pleased with this and disappointed. Well, one man's disappointment is another man's pleasure. So these plaintiffs are very pleased they don't have to go through 2 trials in addition to this tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ultimately the judge's decision, it was a short decision. He said he was basing it on South Carolina rules of civil procedure. Didn't really explain it. So at the end of the day, do you think it was based on the fact that perhaps, I know the Parkers were complaining that the media circus involving Murdaugh was part of the problem, but at the end of the day, it would have been a tremendous inconvenience for the plaintiffs. Do you think that's what guided his decision?
Well, it's more than a simple inconvenience. These young people, all 20 years old at the time of this accident, went through a terrible night, tragic night, and the months and years now after this thing. And this judge's ruling, I think he realized, I know this judge, he's thoughtful, he's fair. I think he realized that there was an unintended consequence, an unintended result, and that was that these plaintiffs would have to go through 2 trials. So they would have been victimized 3 times. And I think that the equities of the alleged prejudice to Parker's versus the prejudice, the incredible impact of 2 trials, and the original incident was just too much for this judge to bear.
All right, Matt Fisher, this was clearly a horrible incident. The Parker Corporation fought to have the Murdaughs kept out of this case as best they could. Again, as I mentioned, they didn't want the media circus that would come along with it. But at the end of the day, they're the important party here because I would imagine Murdaughs don't have a lot of money and the Parker Corporation is the one with the deep pockets.
Who's that question for?
Yeah, that was for Matt.
Okay. Oh, okay. So yes, you're right. Well, we don't know exactly what the Murdaughs have. In truth, there could be money floating around out there we are unaware of yet. There's still a trust that Randolph Murdaugh left. We don't know what's in that trust. And some of the people who were originally sued have settled. So really, I mean, if you are, that is the big catch is Greg Parker and Parker's Convenience Stores. They sold them the alcohol, and your attorneys can tell you as well that the way the South Carolina law is, the convenience store can be held responsible 100% of, as it happens with if a bar would do it, or a grocery store that sold liquor, whatever the case may be. That's not the same everywhere, but in South Carolina, you can be held 100% responsible, as opposed to each person that was involved being a percentage of the claim. So that is, I think, where this is going to be the real showdown for justice.
Now, Joe, you make some interesting claims in your lawsuit involving Connor Cook. I want you to explain to us, you make some claims that the Murdaughs actually tried to obstruct justice or interfere with the process in a few ways. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Michael, as you know, as a litigant, I have to be careful about what I say, and I will say this. The complaint speaks for itself, and it says that there was an apparent effort to misdirect law enforcement in the direction of an accusation of being the operator of the boat against Connor Cook, rather than Paul Murdaugh, actually driver of the boat, whose father owned the boat, loaned the boat to him. Those are all elements of the complaint that we alleged. But all of that is going to be dealt with first in the Beach trial, and the evidence there will, we believe, be sufficient to establish. But over the last year, we've heard more than once from the Parker's Convenience lawyers that part of the trials, part of the Beach case trial, part of the Connor Cook trial will be the assertion by Parker's that Connor Cook was in fact driving the boat, and we think the evidence will be very clear and definitive in that regard, and that's why the Beach case going first, with the parties now joined or rejoined, is important. I'll be there to watch. I'll be there to see how that case goes, and obviously we got a dog in that fight.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, that's an important issue. And Jared Newman, you're a friend of the Murdaughs and understand some of the influence that they wield in the Low Country. My question for you is, based on some of the claims made by Joe in his lawsuit, these are all public record. I'm not, messing with any confidences here. But at the end of the day, these claims that perhaps they tried to interfere with the process, even to the investigation, where it's claimed that perhaps the investigation wasn't done as purely as it could have, that perhaps there was some interference there as well. Did they wield that kind of power in the Low Country?
Yes, I think without question, once law enforcement knew who they were dealing with, who the owner of the boat was, and Joe can straighten me out, but it's my understanding that the owner of a boat is either strictly liable or close. But once the Murdaughs showed up, you've got a former solicitor for many years, and still a solicitor. So they just didn't show up as father and grandfather at the hospital. They just didn't show up at the scene as father and grandfather. I don't want to say that too rudely, but just the fact that the Murdaughs showed up, law enforcement, that would put their hackles up, because they know what they're dealing with. And whether it's true or not, the things I've read about the influence at the hospital and things like that I think is part of Mr. McCullough's case, that influenced law enforcement down here, especially state law enforcement, like the Department of Natural Resources. They were on edge, I'm sure.
No doubt about it. I mean, it's a powerful, powerful family. And, folks who are just tuning in may not be as familiar with this case. The Murdaughs apparently control law and justice in the Low Country for decades, if not longer than that. Now, when the fishing boat crashed and Mallory Beach vanished, Connor Cook, one of the young men on the boat, called 911 for help. You saw that in the story we played for you. Now, the first few minutes of the call are a bit frustrating to listen to, as there is some confusion between the operator and Cook. So let's take a quick listen.
We're in a boat crash on Archer Street.
Whereabouts on Archer Street?
In Archer Street, the only bridge on Archer Street.
Archer Street?
Archer's Creek.
Archer's Creek. Archer's Creek. Is it? Okay. What's going on?
It's by Paris Island.
Right. What's going on?
We're in a boat crash.
You know what kind of a?
A boat crash.
A boat? Did you say a boat crash?
A boat crash.
Okay, so you're at the dock? Hello, are you at the dock?
No, we just crashed in a boat.
Okay, are you in the water or are you?
We're in the boat.
Okay.
We have someone missing.
Now, Joe, again, according to the paperwork in your lawsuit, the Murdaughs, particularly Alec, did something that he's been alleged to have done in a lot of other cases. He instructed your client to take on an attorney recommended by him, a gentleman by the name of Corey Fleming, which I think was probably meant to help him sort of manipulate the process. Is that true?
Well, that's what we've asserted in this lawsuit. It is inexplicable to otherwise explain why Alec Murdaugh would have recommended the godfather of one of his children, in fact, I think Paul, and a lawyer with a clear conflict of interest, in my opinion, from an ethics standpoint. It did not make sense. He was not the lawyer for a very long period of time, and in fact, he ultimately was fired by the Cook family when they learned of his connections, and they were not very happy about that.
Yeah, and again, as you mentioned, that would have been a violation of ethics because Paul was involved in it. The boat belonged to him. Getting involved that way is a violation, correct?
Well, lawyers have a duty to disclose things, relationships, involvements that would affect their ability to be objective. That was not done by Corey Fleming. And it got him disbarred in Georgia, suspended in Georgia, and I think similarly in South Carolina.
Well, I wasn't aware of that. That was as a result of what happened in this case?
Yes.
Wow, okay. All right.
That's my understanding, and I could stand to be corrected, but I think certainly the determination by the Georgia authorities to suspend his license there was considered the involvement, his involvement in the representation issue. So I will say that Connor Cook has not made a complaint against him.
All right.
Corey Fleming was his friend who also was supposed to be handling the Satterfield boys case, and they did not get the money in the death of Gloria Satterfield, the housekeeper. So Corey Fleming got in a lot of trouble for that connection as well.
Absolutely, that's right. I remember Corey was involved in that Gloria Satterfield case. We'll get into that in just a little bit. It is time for a quick break. Excuse me. My guests are going to be staying with me, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at Connor Cook's lawsuit. But before we go, here's a preview of what's coming up in the next hour here on Closing Arguments. In Bismarck, North Dakota, Nikki Ensel accused of cheating on her husband and plotting his murder to collect insurance money. Nikki's ex-lover has already pleaded guilty in the case and is set to testify at trial. We're live in North Dakota for day 2 of the trial.
She stated that her doctor had observed bruises and that she had covered for shed.
We got active shooter.
I was shot in the face. People everywhere, bodies everywhere, chaos everywhere.
This is just a kid. How did he get here?
Were there moments where you second-guessed yourself?
No. There's no one way to say this person is or this person isn't going to become a mass shooter.
Court TV presents Rampage Killers. Premieres Sunday, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
There's 6 of us and 1 is missing.
Okay, there's 6, but 1 is missing. So 6. Do you guys have life jackets on?
Yes, ma'am. We have more than enough life jackets, but we're on the bank.
So you're missing. Who's missing?
A female, Mallory Beach, is missing.
Okay. Why? Okay. What's your name, sir?
My name is Connor Cook.
As he said there, that was Connor Cook, one of the young men on the boat back in February of 2019 when it crashed, throwing Mallory Beach to her death. Connor Cook has filed a lawsuit of his own, much like the wrongful death lawsuit filed by Mallory Beach's family. Connor's case alleges negligence on the part of Cohen and Parker's Corporation for not identifying that Paul Murdaugh was underage, but most of the claims are against Alec Murdaugh, who owned the boat. The case alleges Alec was negligent by letting Paul drive the boat, knowing he regularly drank alcohol underage, and alleges Murdaugh tried to shift the blame from his son Paul onto Cook. Still with me, the attorney for the Murdaugh victims, Joe McCullough, the creator of the Murdaugh podcast, Impact of Influence, Matt Harris, and criminal defense attorney and longtime acquaintance of Alec Murdaugh, Jared Newman. And Joe, quickly, just explain to us how you're attaching negligence, et cetera, to Alec Murdaugh in the case. I understand there's sort of these dram shop laws that apply to the Parker Corporation, that convenience store, but Alec Murdaugh in this case, what are your claims there and how do you intend to prove those?
Well, the claim is called negligent entrustment, meaning Alec Murdaugh, as the owner of this boat and the father of Paul Murdaugh, his son, made this boat available to him, allowed him to use it, had a history of allowing him to use it, was certainly aware of what we believe will come out in the evidence about Paul's issues with alcohol and his behavior when he consumed alcohol. And all of that, we believe, will establish the negligent entrustment, and that's all set forth in the complaint. So that's the essence of that allegation, negligent entrustment and overall negligence, and the providing of a boat that was not properly equipped with lights and so forth, allowing it to be used on a night that was going to be foggy as it was, and allowing it to be used in waters that are difficult to navigate in. So all of that is set out in the lawsuit. And as to his other son, Buster Jr., is how many refer to him, we have alleged in the lawsuit that he made his driver's license, his ID, available to his little brother, his underage brother, knowing how it was to be used. And we believe we'll be able to present a lot of evidence in those regards, and much of that's going to be dealt with in the Beach case, which is the first case.
Sounds to me like as this goes forward, the Beach case, you may find yourself in a position maybe to settle after, but we'll get into that in a second. Matt Harris, I want to check in with you, and in your digging into this case, and you've been following this for quite a while, is there anything interesting you found about this incident and any of the scuttlebutt around that area?
Are you talking about the incident with the crash?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it was a good point he made about not having lights, because the kids in the boat were using flashlights as they were going, and Paul was completely out of his mind from what he says, and was just going around and around in circles for a while. And that area is tough. There's bridges that jut out. There's all kinds of depending on the tide, many things you can run into. He just barely missed a boat as he was leaving the Buford bar, and he even almost started a fight in the bar that he was in on his way out, knocking over some chairs or something like that. And people knew that he had this reputation, he had an alter ego that would come out, and they called him his name. When he took off his shirt, it was freezing that night, it was cold, driving out without a shirt on. I believe it was Connor's cousin, actually, Anthony, that asked to be left off at one of the docks, and Paul refused. And then, eventually it led to the death of Mallory Beach, and 3 of them were ejected into the cold water. And I think one thing one of the reasons the 911 operator probably had difficulty understanding Connor, Connor had broken his jaw, if I'm correct on that. I'm sure they can straighten me out on that, but he had a broken jaw as he was making that call.
Yeah, Joe, there were some fairly serious injuries suffered by Connor in this incident.
When the boat struck the bridge, his face hit, we believe, the hand railing, which knocked him out, broke his jaw in multiple places. He fell to the deck of the boat and cut a gigantic gash in his face, which was bleeding the entire time. When he woke up moments later, he had the presence of mind courageously, in my opinion. Your viewers can be the judges, but he managed to get up a hill with his cell phone and find cell service, because there was no cell service down in the ditch of the creek where the bridge accident collision occurred. He had the presence of mind to get to the high ground, to get up on the bridge, to walk to a point, find coverage, and then to deal with the 911 operator. And you have to understand about the low country, there are creeks all over the place. So Connor having the presence of mind to talk them in to understanding exactly where they were was really something. So it says a lot about this young man under grace under pressure.
Jared Newman, how do you see this case playing out? I know the Parker Corporation is eager to put on a defense. Any sense of what a defense might be to this case, and how do you expect the case to play out?
Well, I mean, I can't really make predictions. If I were Parker's, I would defend on, well, they checked an ID. Their actions were reasonable. Clearly, they owe a duty under the Dram Shop Act. They're not going to get around any of that. The only thing I can think as a defense is that we took a minimal procedure and looked at an ID of a brother. However, I do think being in law enforcement and being in this business for 40 years, that is not an uncommon thing where a younger brother uses an older brother's ID. I don't know what kind of training the people at Parker's had. I think that may be an issue. But the bottom line is they did sell somebody underage alcohol. And I guess their best defense would be we used reasonable steps to try and prevent that from happening, although it did happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's about limiting the damages.
In South Carolina, they're going to argue that you don't have to check height and weight, because that's the big thing. Buster was much bigger than Paul, and but they both had red hair. And that's what I've heard is going to be the argument, that they were close enough, height and weight don't matter. That's going to be the pitch.
All right, well, we'll be looking forward to that case and definitely keeping folks updated on what happens there. Joe McCullough, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Truly appreciate it. As always, we appreciate your time. Matt and Jared, you're going to be sticking around with me, because when we come back, we have a special guest who has been looking into Alec Murdaugh's drug and money laundering charges and a possible connection to a well-known LA gang. Keep it here, folks.
So anyway, when they said on here, whoever said it, apparently they went and got a search warrant and took that phone that they gave me in rehab and my iPad.
Don't you have to be presented with a search warrant?
Buster, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure what the law is on that, but...
I mean, is that a violation of your Fourth Amendment?
I think at some point they got to serve a copy, but maybe they're giving it to Jim and Dick. I don't know. It doesn't matter, because
Well, I think it does matter, man. I don't think it's, I mean, something's got to give. I mean, I understand that you've done illegal, but that doesn't mean you can just, turn a cold shoulder to the laws of the United States.
I've allegedly done illegal stuff. I'm kidding. Anyway.
All right, that was Alec Murdaugh on the phone with his living son Buster from jail back in December, laughing as he says allegedly illegal stuff. And everyone is innocent until proven guilty, of course. Well, Alec Murdaugh is charged with the murders of his wife and son, who were found shot to death last summer. He's also accused of numerous financial crimes, including money laundering and drug distribution. The indictment reads, between October 7, 2013 and February 28, 2021, Murdaugh wrote at least 437 checks intended for Smith, that's Smith, Ed Smith, with a sum value of more than $2 million. Now, Smith converted the checks into cash or deposits. Murdaugh and Smith structured many of these transactions and used them to facilitate the acquisition and distribution of illegally obtained narcotics. Now, in that same document, Murdaugh and Smith, now remember, Smith is the guy that was involved in sort of faking that murder or suicide on the roadside. He's charged with manufacturing, distributing, or possessing narcotic drugs, namely oxycodone. And the New York Post reported that Murdaugh's involvement in drug distribution could be intertwined with a Bloods-affiliated street gang called the Walterboro Cowboys. That article says Cowboy cousins Jerry Rivers, 39, and his friend Spencer Anwan Roberts, 34, were indicted on August 19th on charges that prosecutors say involve possibly being part of Murdaugh's alleged drug and money laundering pipeline in the Low Country. Jerry Rivers spoke to the Post and denied his involvement, saying he's been railroaded. All right, still with me, Matt Harris and Jared Newman, and joining us now in New York City is a reporter for the New York Post, Dana Kennedy. Dana, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Glad to be here.
All right, so I got to start with you because this thing, as I was reading this, it's just, I mean, it's incredible, all the different connections. Not unbelievable, incredible is the word I'm using. Explain to us a little bit about this connection and how it all filtered down to this Bloods-affiliated gang.
Well, it's a pretty murky connection, like so many things in this story that have a million rabbit holes. But these two guys that you mentioned before, Jerry Rivers and Spencer Roberts, were both brought to the courtroom in August, right around the same time Alec Murdaugh got one of his latest charges. And the prosecutor didn't explain right away what they had to do with Murdaugh until later. But he said that they were receiving checks, or they had received checks, and he used the word that they got downstream from Curtis Smith, we all call him Cousin Eddie, and Alex Murdaugh. He didn't say anything more. And as you know, Michael, from following this case, there are a lot of what you might even call red herrings thrown up at people. They might not even be red herrings, but they're sort of new plot twists and plot points that you don't really know what's true and what isn't. But these two guys are what I would call cousins of the Walterboro Cowboys. And the Cowboys are a violent gang in Walterboro, which lies right off I-95 in South Carolina. And one of them, Jerry Rivers, served time with Bernie Madoff's brother for cocaine trafficking about 10 or 12 years ago. So he's the real deal. And I went to visit him at his house. He had his ankle bracelet, said he was railroaded. And I went to talk later to actual gang members. They make the distinction that Jerry and Spencer aren't full bloods, but they all know them. And for example, Jerry Rivers lives across the street from the main Walterboro Cowboy who's serving serious time now. And at first, when I talked to some of these gang members, they were giving me a little bit of information, but not a whole lot. And while I was with them at one of their houses in what they call the east side of Walterboro, this other guy pulled up and he wasn't happy to see me. You know those situations when things start to go south, and he wanted to see more ID from me and who I was. And I walked to my car to get some ID to show him, and he still was in a really bad mood and angry. He didn't seem to be playing me. Then he leaned on my car window and said, "I don't know who you are and what you want, but Alec Murdaugh is running half the drugs in this county."
Again, I just have to laugh. And Jared Newman, I've got to get you into this because my question is, and I asked Joe McCullough this before. He was on my show a couple of times. And, was there any inkling around the legal community or in the community as a whole that this guy, Alec Murdaugh, was involved this deep in these types of things? I mean, what do you make of this connection or possible connection?
I mean, I'm flabbergasted by it. You talk about leading a double life if these things are in fact true. I mean, I see Alex all the time in Walterboro in court. various places, courts. There's 5 counties in the circuit, so we have 5 courthouses, and knowing the guy, talking to the guy, beer with him, now and then after court, things like that. This just, I can't explain it. If all this is true, he's a master magician, because I would have had no clue of any connections. I know who the Cowboys are. Sometimes they're called the Cowboys or Get Money Cowboys. I know there was a federal RICO suit a criminal suit that got a lot of people in jail from them. I know their affiliations from the West Coast and things like that. But I just can't see Alex traveling in those type of circles. Maybe with Cousin Eddie, because Alex is a good old boy. Everybody likes him, and he wants to say hey in the bar. How's everybody? How's your wife, girlfriend? Those type of things. But having an affiliation to a drug gang, and I know some of these gangbangers by reputation. I haven't represented any of them that I know of, but I can't explain it. What an act!
Yeah, it's again mind-boggling. Matt Harris, I have to ask, maybe, is there anything you've uncovered? Because the thing that comes to my mind is that maybe all of these connections, they might be somehow work their way into that murder case that's coming up involving his wife and son, that perhaps the defense can use this in some way to suggest someone else might be responsible. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this possible connection and anything you've uncovered about this?
Well, I mean, there has been that word from the very beginning that there was drugs involved with the murders in some way. That rumor and thought popped up right away. But here's the thing. They said Alec was addicted to opioids for 20 years, and yet you really can't find anybody that saw him looking like he was strung out or a mess. And if he had an addiction for 20 years and had millions and millions and millions of dollars in opioids, I mean, if he's bought as many opioids as they say he did, there's no way he'd be alive with that amount of money changing hands. And you mentioned that, imagine hanging out with these guys, and maybe he didn't, because the way it supposedly worked was he would give money to Eddie, and then Eddie would go down and get these 2 guys, and they would do that and come back to him. So he might not have, rubbing elbows with them. But there is definitely major doubts and rumors and suspicions that he was using all those opioids for all those years and all those millions on himself alone. It just doesn't add up.
Yeah. Another twist in the case, Dana, was that the sheriff who was in charge at the time that an original group of cowboys were arrested, he was also found to be involved in the illegal drug trade. Again, things not falling too far from this center of power on law and justice in the Low Country. Yeah, well,
this plays into, every sort of low budget type of movie that you might have heard about, the Deep South. All that's missing is, Jackie Gleason in this scenario, I think. One of the cowboys said to me very resentfully, why don't you look into some of these white sheriffs who are always coming here and trying to bust us? In fact, that sheriff, Andy Strickland, who sent all the top cowboy leaders to prison about 8 years ago, himself was found to be dealing Adderall and amphetamines, and I think, I'm not going to say the other charges, I don't have them off the top of my head, but a bunch of other bad things. And he was discharged from the department, but I think only got probation. So that kind of gives you an idea how the South still does justice.
Exactly. He only got 5 years probation. A bunch of people in jail. This guy walks away with 5 years probation. Just a lot of corruption going on. We're uncovering it as we go through this Alec Murdaugh case. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dana Kennedy. Truly appreciate it. Wish we had a little bit more time. But Jared Newman and Matt Harris, you're going to be sticking around once again for a quick break. We're going to take that right now. And here's a look at what's coming up in the next hour on Closing Arguments. In Las Vegas, Nevada, a teen accused of sexually assaulting and attempting to kill his teacher is released from prison, and his bail is reduced. The think tank weighs in.
This is an example of the kind of behavior that will not be tolerated.
blood all over the house.
A senseless tragedy in small-town America.
This was a pre-planned execution.
It was a feud between families that ended with multiple murders.
Came in like thieves in the night and took 8 lives.
George Wagner faces murder charges in connection with the killing.
Wagner's brother and parents also charged.
It's very much a family affair. All for one for all.
It's a chilling story. It will be an intense trial.
The Ohio Family Massacre Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings on Court TV.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennels.
That was, of course, Alec Murdaugh calling 911 after he says he found the bodies of his wife and son shot to death at their so-called hunting lodge in South Carolina last June. And this week, we're learning that the so-called Moselle estate where Paul and Maggie were killed may soon be sold. The house was put on the market in February, and according to the Post and Courier, a buyer has emerged to place the property under contract, undeterred by the property's $3.9 million asking price or its violent past. All right, let's bring back in our guests, Matt Harris and Jared Newman. $3.9 million, 1,700 acres. According to the agent, it wasn't a discounted price. Matt Harris, I'll start with you. There's a contract on it, makes sense. People sometimes have a fascination with these things, but mostly it's just a really large piece of land. It comes with a over 5,000 square foot house on it. No surprise it's sold.
No, I mean, it was an adjacent, from what I understand, adjacent property that is going to buy it if they can, because it has to go through the people who, the conservators of Alex. Well, I mean, it was Maggie's property, but it went to Alec after that. If we tried to pass it to Buster, but that's not going to happen. So the conservators will have to approve of the sale. But the property's used a lot for hunting. They also sell some timber off of that. The house is a nice house. 3.9 million seems like a lot, considering that he sold it to his wife for $5, but that's perfectly fine move. And I assume that it's going to go through, but again, I understand it's somebody who has an adjacent property and is just going to add on to their estate.
Yeah, so what happens to that money? You talked about the conservatorship. You also mentioned earlier there was a trust. Because there's a lot of questions as to money. How is he going to pay his attorneys? How is he going to pay any of the judgments that may come back against him? Well, why did they put this up for sale? Was this for the money to help pay some of the bills they have coming in?
That's yeah, they have to get some liquid assets. I'm sure that, well, first of all, he's going to owe a bunch of people money. Everybody's already standing in line to get the money that he's allegedly stolen from everybody. It's I think it's up to 6 million, something like that, but I think it'll grow more. And I'm guessing his lawyers are probably in agreement, going to want some money at some point. So they need some money to pay off the people that they ripped off, or pay back, I should say, the people they ripped off, and also to try to pay for a defense.
Now, Jared, the murders that took place on this property, I mean, that's really the center of this whole thing. The fact that he's accused of killing his own wife and son just boggles the mind. Maybe it was the drugs. Again, we don't know. But there's evidence in this case that, I mean, initially, he had claimed he was somewhere else. He was visiting his mother, his father. He was off the premises. Then there was some evidence that was leaked that contradicted that. Where does this case stand in your mind?
Well, you know, not being privy to the investigation, I'd like to know one simple thing. When the deputies rolled up, did they feel the hood of his car or the grill or under his car to see if it was even warm? I mean, that's just a simple thing an arriving officer does. I'd like to know that. There's just a myriad of things I'd like to know. I find it highly implausible that you shoot two different people with two different weapons. I'd like to know if the weapons were functional, still had ammunition, because I can't see as somebody, you know, shooting a person and then saying, wait a minute, I'm going to
I'm sorry,
get a
man. I
different
got to
gun and
cut you off.
shoot you.
I'm coming to the top of the hour. But yes, many, many questions in this.